Today, I would like to talk about the Buddhist scriptures for beginners. If you're new to Buddhism, one of the first questions you probably have is, what are the Buddhist scriptures? Is there a Buddhist Bible? And where do I begin? So, do we have a Buddhist Bible? No, there is no central book or even a central authority that all Buddhists recognize, and there's a reason for this. If you look at a map of Asia, we actually have 3 branches of Buddhism, and it's geographically based. And this is due to how Buddhism was transmitted out of ancient India, where Buddhism and multiple schools originated from. So we basically have a northern and southern transmission. So looking at our 3 major branches today, in the southern transmission, which we call Southeast Asian Buddhism, or more typically we just call it Theravada Buddhism, we have countries such as Thailand, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, etc. They follow what's called the Pali Canon. Now moving on up to East Asia, which we call East Asian Buddhism, we have countries such as China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and even Vietnam, even though it's in Southeast Asia. They follow what's called the Chinese canon, and we traditionally call this type of Buddhism Mahayana Buddhism because of the scriptures, Mahayana scriptures that are inside their canon, but it's actually East Asian Buddhism. Now, going to Central Asia, we have something called Tibetan Buddhism, and it has the countries, of course, of Tibet, Mongolia, Himalayas, etc. Now they have the Tibetan canon. Now they have Mahayana scriptures inside there also, but it's a distinct form of Buddhism from East Asian Buddhism. So we got these 3 major branches of Buddhism, and each one has its own scriptural canon. So what makes up a scriptural canon inside Buddhism? Largely the same things. If we kind of look at it, it's either called a Tipitaka or Tripitaka, meaning 3 baskets, and this was the original way they were kind of grouped together and organized. So we have what's called a Vinaya, which is going to be the rules or precepts for monastics, such as monks and nuns. Beyond that, we're going to have what's called the Suttas or Sutras. These are the sermons of the Buddha or one of his enlightened disciples. This is also where you'll find such popular works such as the Dhammapada and even the Buddha's past life tales. Now, after that, we have something called the Abhidhamma or Abhidharma. This is basically the analysis, the commentaries, these higher level learnings as it relates to Buddhism in that particular tradition, that particular branch of Buddhism. So when we look at these 3 main categories, we find that they're in the Pali Canon, of course, but also inside the Chinese canon. Now, looking over to the Tibetan canon, they actually only have 2 groupings right there, but it actually contains all 3 of those as well. Now, going back to the Chinese canon, you actually see it actually has like another category altogether, basically a whole bunch more. And this is why the Chinese canon is sometimes called a library. It just has so much information inside it. So we have these 3 distinct canons there, but they're all essentially grouped the same and essentially contain the same things. A little bit different insofar as the Abhidhamma or the commentaries, whatever you want to call them, they're going to be different between them all. They'll have some things that overlap, some things that will not. When it comes to the Suttas and Sutras, they are largely going to be the same between all the schools because of the common origins inside ancient India. Now, the Vinaya, the rules or precepts for monks and monastics, those will be generally the same, although there'll be differences as well. Now, as far as a layperson like you or me, like where do we kind of begin with all this? The Vinaya, we're not going to be looking at. These are for the monastics. However, such things as the 5 precepts are actually born out of the Vinaya. So there's actually a part of Vinaya that came to laypersons. When it comes to the Suttas and Sutras, well, there's going to be, depending on your particular school or tradition of Buddhism, maybe certain scriptures that you're going to be focusing on more rather than other ones. And then when it comes to the Abhidhamma or Abhidharma or the commentaries, unlikely you're going to be kind of digging into these as a layperson, but this is going to be something I'll talk about here in a second. Now, going back to the Chinese canon and even the Tibetan canon, they have something that the Pali canon does not have, which is going to be Mahayana scriptures. So Mahayana scriptures really, that makes up these two major parts of Buddhism, between Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. Those scriptures are a big deal because they contain very, very popular scriptures that are used by millions and millions and millions of Buddhists around the world. So we have such ones as the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Platform Sutra, and even what's called the Pure Land Sutras. And so these make up a lot of Buddhists around the world, and they actually follow these Mahayana scriptures. Now, what's really interesting about this, even though we have the Chinese canon, which contains, for example, the same things as the Pali canon in many aspects, a lot of laypersons will just follow maybe one, two, or just a few of the actual Mahayana scriptures. And why is that? It's because in Mahayana Buddhism, we look at these Mahayana scriptures as almost containing, in a lot of cases, the essence or distilling all of Buddhism into like one actual sutra. So it's actually this container, if you will. If you just read this one sutra, you have everything that might be inside an actual canon. When it comes to the Pure Land Sutras, there's a whole Pure Land Buddhism in Mahayana, and that's actually very popular as well too. And so those sutras are actually the foundation of Pure Land Buddhism. So these Mahayana sutras are very, very important to those in East Asian Buddhism and even in Central Asian Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism. So this is just a very quick overview of all of these. And probably the one question you're also going to have, that last part of the question, is going to be like, where do I actually start with all this? So on my website, I actually have an entire article on this with like videos, infographics, etc. But what's also going to contain is for Theravada, Mahayana, and Tibetan Buddhism is going to have inside there certain scriptures you should probably read if you're new to Buddhism, depending on your particular tradition. Now, another part of this is going to be, well, is there like that Buddhist Bible? And I said there's none, right? So a lot of people might be going, well, what about the Dhammapada or Dharmapada? Like it's this short sayings of the Buddha. This is almost like a Buddhist Bible. Well, to a degree, yes, it's nice and easy to read, but it kind of goes into this larger thing I'm going to talk about, which is going to be you need an actual Buddhist teacher. And for a lot of us, that means we don't have a temple nearby or an actual Buddhist teacher, but we're going to have, books and videos. So when you have this actual monastic, monk or nun, who's actually in the tradition, who's looking at the Abhidharma, who's looking at, has a Vinaya that they're following and they've been studying the sutras and suttas, they're going to have a more firm and deeper understanding of how to practice and understand this in a way that we possibly couldn't. So when you read their books or listen to their Dharma talks, you're actually getting Buddhism that relates to us, that we can understand. Now, if you looked at the Dhammapada and you're like, well, I read this as short. I get what it's trying to say here. Maybe, maybe not. It could be the translation could be wrong or could not be in a way that is best illustrated to help you understand it. You might be also interpreting things based upon your perceptions of what you think it means. So that's the trouble with just going straight into scripture and going, well, I could figure this stuff out on my own. Well, not necessarily. When you look at these Buddhist traditions, they've had centuries and centuries and centuries of analysis, commentary, debate, learning it. And so we're coming in like day one, well, I can figure this out. That could be quite a bit of a stretch. So make sure you find an actual Buddhist teacher that you like. There's plenty of books out there that can help guide you in this one. If you're near a Buddhist temple, that'll be the best way to actually get involved. There's going to be Dharma talks and stuff like that. There's going to be classes typically. This is the best way to actually learn. So you don't want to go buy an entire Buddhist scriptural canon and have it in your home. It's going to be unlikely you're going to get through all of that. Not to mention it's going to be extremely expensive. But the best way, again, is to find an actual Buddhist temple, Buddhist monk, Buddhist nun that's going to help you understand this one, whether that's in person or virtually, online, or through books, or whatever the case might be. So I do have some recommendations for some books you can actually use by some legitimate Buddhist teachers that can help you along, but also a lot more resources on my website. I'll include that in the description below. If you got any questions about the Buddhist scriptures, please let me know. Thank you.